I swear, at first I thought it was just dust. You know, getting older, suddenly everything starts bothering your body. My nose wouldn't stop running, my eyes burned, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I'd breathed in a whole bag of pepper. It got so bad I started popping antihistamines like candy. One morning, after yet another sneezing fit over my coffee, I just snapped. I told myself I was done guessing what was causing it. I was going to clean every corner of that house until either the allergies stopped or I did. I started in the kitchen because that's where I spend half my life. I pulled the fridge away from the wall, found old crumbs and a fork that had probably been missing since last Thanksgiving. I wiped cupboards inside and out, scrubbing sticky rings of old coffee mugs off the shelves. The whole time, I kept thinking how ironic it was that I was the one slowly falling apart, while he walked around perfectly fine, healthy as ever. By the time I finished the kitchen, my back hurt, my hair was a mess, and the garbage bag was full of things we should have thrown away years ago. From there, I moved to the living room, dusting picture frames, vacuuming under the couch, even washing those throw blankets he always said made the place look like a grandma's house. I tried not to think too much, just move, just clean, just breathe. But the sneezing wouldn't stop. That's when I decided to do the one place I never touched. The garage. That was his territory, his little kingdom of tools and boxes and half-finished projects. I opened the door, and the smell of oil and metal hit me. I started moving things around, sweeping, stacking boxes. And then, when I shifted one of his tool cases, I saw it. A small purse tucked behind it, out of sight, like it had crawled there to hide. At first, I just stared at it. A tiny beige purse, definitely not mine, definitely not something I'd ever seen in my home. My stomach clenched in this instinctive way, like my body already knew what my mind refused to consider. I picked it up with 2 fingers, almost afraid it'd burn me. Inside there wasn't makeup or receipts or anything normal. No. There was a cell phone, fully charged, screen lighting up the second I pressed the button. My breath hitched. Why would there be a phone hidden in our garage? Why would it be hidden at all? I told myself it was probably an old one of his, even though I'd never seen it before. But my hand was shaking when I tried the first password. His birthday. Wrong. Then our anniversary. Wrong again. I felt ridiculous, like a paranoid wife trying to break into something she shouldn't. And then, without thinking, I typed the name of our dog, the name he uses for everything he wants to keep easy. And just like that, the phone unlocked. The little click was so loud in that silent garage it felt like a gunshot. My heart dropped straight through the floor. I opened the Messages app, telling myself I'd find something harmless. Maybe work chats, maybe old notes. But the first thread had a woman's name I didn't recognize, and then another, and another. Photos, conversations. Voice messages. It was like someone had cracked my ribs open and dipped my heart into ice water. I scrolled, not really breathing. Different women, different months, different hotel rooms. My hands started trembling so badly I had to sit down right there on the cold concrete floor. That was the moment the truth hit me like a truck. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was a double life I had never ever been invited to see. I don't even remember when the tears started, just that once they came, they wouldn't stop. It wasn't a delicate cry either. It was one of those ugly, raw breakdowns where your whole body shakes and you can't seem to pull in enough air. I kept staring at the screen through watery eyes, scrolling even though every new message felt like another stab. I saw dates from nights he claimed he was working late, photos from weekends he said he was exhausted, and messages where he joked about how clueless I was. My vision blurred completely at that part. I think a part of me broke in a way that'll never fully heal. I leaned against the tool cabinet, the metal cold against my back, and let out this choked sound, half laugh, half sob. Because suddenly, Everything made sense. The allergies, the stress, the exhaustion. My body had been screaming at me for weeks, trying to tell me something was rotting underneath my life. And like an idiot, I thought it was dust. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, but the crying just kept coming, messy and unstoppable. I kept whispering, "Why? Why would he do this to me? Why wasn't I enough?" Even though deep down, I knew none of this had anything to do with my worth. Eventually, the sobs softened, and something inside me changed. It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't understanding. It was colder, sharper, a kind of clarity that felt almost unnatural. I looked at that phone, at the proof of every lie he'd ever fed me, and something clicked in my chest. If he could build a secret life behind my back, then I could build a plan right under his nose. I wiped the last tear with my thumb, took a deep breath, and whispered into the empty garage, "Fine, let's play." For the rest of that day, it felt like I was walking around in someone else's skin. Everything looked the same kitchen tiles, the same sofa cushions, the same framed photos of us smiling at barbecues and weddings, but nothing felt the same. It was like the world had been quietly rearranged behind my back, and now I was the only one who could see the cracks. I kept the secret phone tucked inside my sweater sleeve, almost afraid it would disappear, and I'd start convincing myself the whole thing had been a hallucination brought on by my allergies. When he came home that night, he kissed the top of my head and said he'd had a long day. Hearing those words almost made me laugh. He didn't even blink, didn't even sense that the ground beneath us had shifted. He sat on the couch scrolling his regular phone while I stood in the hallway watching him like he was a stranger who had broken in. I swear, if someone had asked me in that moment how long I'd known the man in front of me, I wouldn't have been able to give an honest answer. Later, when he went to shower, I slipped into my office with the hidden phone. The moment I turned the screen on, all that raw pain came rushing back. But this time, I forced myself to breathe slowly. I wasn't going to fall apart again. Not yet. I opened the message threads one by one, studying them like evidence in some crime documentary. I checked dates, locations, photos, timestamps. He'd used this phone for years, not weeks, not months, years. And the worst part? He recycled the same excuses with each woman, the same cheesy lines, the same pet names. It was like watching someone perform the same disgusting script over and over again, except I was the only one who hadn't known I was part of the cast. The more I scrolled, the more the puzzle pieces of my past started snapping together. Moments I'd dismissed, little things I'd brushed off to keep the peace, now returned like ghosts demanding attention. I remembered nights he came home smelling faintly of a woman's perfume and claimed it was from a coworker's hug. I remembered the weekends he suddenly had urgent errands that took hours, the late-night messages he said were about team deadlines, the way he got defensive whenever I asked harmless questions. With every chat I opened, I could feel this cold realization settling in my bones. He hadn't just lied to me. He'd trained me to doubt myself. There was one photo, God, I wish I hadn't opened it, that nearly tore me in half. He was in a hotel room, grinning into the camera, holding a bottle of champagne. The woman taking the picture had her legs stretched across his lap, red toenails, laughing. The timestamp said it was from a night he told me he'd slept at the office because of a power outage, and I believed him. Not only believed him, I brought him dinner the next day because he said he was exhausted. When that memory hit me, something inside me snapped hard, like a wire pulled too tight finally breaking. But as I kept scrolling, the tears stopped. My breathing steadied. I wasn't shaking anymore. A different feeling rose up, slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly calm. I took screenshots of everything, every message, every photo, every hotel confirmation. I transferred the files to my laptop, then emailed them to a private account he didn't know existed. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was documenting, observing, preparing, and that shift felt empowering in a way I didn't expect. If he had spent years building this secret life, fine. I would spend the next days building the ending of it. By the time I finished organizing everything, the house was quiet again. I could hear the shower running upstairs, steady, casual, like nothing in his world was crumbling. I sat there in the dim light of my office, the hum of my laptop the only sound, and realized I didn't feel helpless anymore. If anything, I felt alert, awake in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was like my heartbreak had sharpened my senses instead of dulling them. I could feel every muscle in my body humming with purpose. When he finally came down the stairs, towel draped over his shoulders, he said he was starving and wondered why I hadn't started dinner yet. That's exactly how he phrased it, like it was my default role, like nothing in the universe could possibly be off. I watched him rummage in the fridge, humming some stupid tune, and it hit me like a slap. He genuinely believed he was untouchable, that I would never question him, never look deeper, never find the truth he'd buried right under my nose. The entitlement rolled off him so thick I could practically taste it. And that's when the decision crystallized inside me. I wasn't confronting him yet, not crying, not screaming, not begging for explanations I already knew would be lies. No. I wanted to see him lie to me again, wanted to watch the way his eyes narrowed just slightly, the way he rubbed the back of his neck, the way he added too many details to stories that were never real. I wanted to study the performance with new eyes, because this time, I knew the script. And once I understood every move he made, I'd know exactly how to dismantle him, slowly, methodically, with the same precision he had used to betray me. The next morning, I woke up before him. I watched him sleep for a moment, peaceful, unbothered, the face of a man who believed he was safe in every direction. I used to find comfort in that sight. This time, though, it felt like watching a stranger borrow my husband's skin. When he finally stirred, he stretched, sighed, and told me he slept like a baby, completely unaware that a storm was building 2 feet from him. I murmured something casual back, something soft enough to keep him from noticing how tightly I was gripping my own hands. For the next few days, I played the part. I cooked breakfast, packed lunches, asked about his meetings, laughed when he made some half-funny joke. Every time he leaned in to kiss my cheek, I resisted the urge to flinch. Every time he called me sweetheart, I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. It felt surreal, performing normalcy while knowing everything beneath the surface was rotten. But pretending gave me something precious. Time. Time to prepare. Time to observe. Time to let him reveal himself again and again. And oh, he did. Like clockwork, he came home one evening saying a co-worker needed help moving some heavy furniture. Another night, he said he'd be late because he was overseeing a client call. Once he even said he was running to the store for allergy medicine, for me, and disappeared for 2 hours. Every excuse, every flimsy story sounded different to me now. I could hear the cracks in every sentence, the rehearsed tone he didn't realize he had, the tiny smirk he tried to hide. It was almost fascinating. Almost. Because beneath the calm I projected, a fire quietly spread through me, ready to devour everything he thought he controlled. While he went on with his charades, I built my own world in silence. Every morning after he left for work, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop and that hidden phone, piecing together the architecture of his betrayals. I made folders, timelines, charts, things I never imagined I'd be capable of. But betrayal has a way of turning you into the most organized version of yourself. I tracked dates of trips he never told me about, compared them to credit card statements, cross-referenced them with messages he sent those women. The more I uncovered, the clearer my purpose became. Then came the day I contacted a lawyer. I remember sitting in her office, cool air conditioning, the faint smell of expensive paper and fresh ink, and hearing her say I had more than enough evidence to protect myself. She didn't have to ask twice why I wanted the divorce to be strategic rather than explosive. She just nodded, almost respectfully, and said, "We'll make sure he can't twist this on you." Hearing that felt like someone placing a hand on my back, steadying me. For the first time, I wasn't dealing with his lies alone. I didn't stop there. I dug into our finances with a precision I didn't know I had. I found accounts he opened without telling me, charges he tried to disguise, and hotel bookings he'd deleted from his visible email. I archived everything, screenshot after screenshot, printed copies, digital backups. It became a ritual, steady, cleansing. And while I worked, I'd catch myself remembering old moments. Nights he accused me of being tired all the time. Mornings he said I didn't put effort into us anymore. Knowing now that he had been using my exhaustion as a distraction tactic made my blood simmer with a quiet but lethal calm. But the strangest part was how easy it became to act normal around him. Almost frighteningly easy. I'd hand him his coffee in the morning, listening as he rambled about meetings he didn't have, coworkers he barely knew, weekend plans he absolutely wouldn't keep. He'd smile at me with that same boyish charm he used when we first met, completely unaware that I now saw every micro-expression, every twitch, every hesitation for what it really was. A lie rehearsed so many times he could say it half asleep. And I'd nod, hum, maybe even touch his arm lightly, all while memorizing every tell he revealed. Meanwhile, I kept strengthening my emotional armor. I scheduled a session with a therapist, quietly, discreetly. I told her everything, from the allergies that pushed me into the garage to the messages that split my world in two. She didn't interrupt. She just let me talk, let me unravel the tangled threads, then helped me weave them back into something steadier, stronger. She said something I'll never forget. Revenge isn't about hurting him. It's about choosing yourself after he didn't. Those words settled deep inside me and changed the way I approached everything that followed. Each night after he fell asleep, usually with a smug little smile, as if he'd fooled the universe yet again, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling. Not crying, not shaking, just planning. Because by then, the fear was gone. The desperation had drained out of me. All that remained was clarity. Sharp, cold, unwavering clarity. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew how to do it. And I knew the perfect moment to strike. All I had to do was wait. And let him believe he was still in control. I chose a Thursday evening. Not for any sentimental reason. God knows there was nothing sentimental left between us. But because Thursdays were the nights he usually claimed he had team-building drinks. I knew he'd come home relaxed, smug, maybe even a little proud of himself. And I wanted him off guard. That morning, I kissed his cheek, light, casual, perfectly normal, and told him I'd make his favorite dinner. He lit up the way he always did when he thought he was being pampered. He said he deserved a good meal after the week he'd had. Imagine that. He deserved it. All day, I cooked. I set the table, lit candles, even played that soft jazz playlist he always said made him feel like we were classy. My hands moved steadily, but my mind was a different story. Every slice of the knife, every stir of the pot felt like preparation for a performance I had rehearsed in silence. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. If anything, I felt strangely calm, almost serene. Like I'd already crossed the point of no return, and now I was simply following the path I'd carved. When he finally walked through the door, he looked exactly like I'd predicted. Confident, loose, smelling faintly of beer and overpriced cologne. He blinked at the table setting, clearly surprised, and said he didn't expect something this fancy for a regular Thursday. I smiled, sweetly, evenly, and told him I wanted us to spend more quality time together. He bought it instantly. He slid into his chair, reached for the wine I'd poured, and told me he appreciated the effort. The arrogance in his voice made the edges of my vision tighten, but I kept smiling. Soon, I told myself. Soon everything would shift. We ate like we were starring in a commercial for happy marriages. He complimented the seasoning on the chicken, joked about how he should hire me as his personal chef, and even reached across the table to squeeze my hand. I let him. I let him play his part in the little fantasy he believed he controlled. The candles flickered between us, casting warm shadows on a man I no longer recognized, someone who wore familiarity like a mask. And the whole time, the hidden phone sat quietly in the drawer behind me, waiting for its moment. About halfway through the meal, he launched into some story about a coworker who'd been so dramatic that day. He said she cried over something trivial, and he laughed as he imitated her voice. I didn't miss the irony. I watched his face carefully, the smug tilt of his chin, the pride in being the hero of his own story. He had no idea the real story was about to start. When he paused to take a sip of wine, I excused myself calmly and went to the drawer. When I returned, I didn't sit. I didn't say a word. I simply placed the hidden phone on the table, right between his plate and his wine glass. At first, he didn't understand. He blinked, confused, like I'd placed a dead bird in front of him. Then the color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His hand froze midair, his lips parted with this tiny, strangled sound, and his eyes, those eyes I'd stared into for years, lost every ounce of confidence. In that instant, I watched his entire world tilt. And God help me, I felt nothing but clarity. He didn't touch the phone at first. He just stared at it like it might explode. Then he looked at me, slowly, cautiously, as if trying to gauge how much I knew. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. He asked where I'd found it, but he said it the way a guilty child asks if someone saw him break the vase. No righteous anger, no confusion, just fear dressed up as curiosity. And that's when I realized he already knew the truth. He just didn't know how much of it I'd seen. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down with a calm that surprised even me. I told him I'd found the phone in the garage while cleaning. I told him I had opened it. And then I told him I had read everything. His face contorted, first denial, then panic, then this pitiful attempt at forming excuses. He said things like, "You're misunderstanding the context," and "those conversations didn't mean anything," and my personal favorite, "If you'd been giving me more attention, none of this would have happened." He said it all in that indirect, wounded tone, like he was the one who'd been wronged. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. Instead, I told him, quietly, clearly, what I'd seen. I described one of the messages where he said he was tired of dealing with a wife who didn't appreciate him. I repeated the night he told another woman he wished he could escape the emotional suffocation at home. Every example stripped another layer of color from his face. He kept trying to interrupt, begging me to stop twisting his words, insisting I was looking for reasons to be upset. But the lies didn't land anymore. They slid right off me. And as he spiraled, I just watched, detached, realizing this wasn't even the revenge. This was just the opening act. He didn't sleep that night. I heard him pacing the hallway, opening and closing drawers, muttering to himself like a man trying to stitch together a story with threads that no longer existed. I lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to every frantic step. And for the first time in a long time, his restlessness didn't affect me. I felt almost still, like I had finally stopped treading water after years of drowning quietly. By morning, I was sitting at the kitchen counter drinking coffee when he walked in, eyes bloodshot, shoulders slumped. He asked if we could talk things out calmly. I almost laughed. I told him I had already taken the necessary steps. I didn't say it cruelly. I said it factually, like reading a weather report. I explained that the divorce papers were ready and he'd be served soon. His face twisted in disbelief, like I wasn't allowed to make decisions without running them through him first. He said it wasn't fair for me to make such a drastic choice without giving him a chance to prove he could change. The audacity made my chest tighten, not from hurt this time, but from a cold, firm sense of justice. I reminded him I wasn't basing my choices on promises. I was basing them on patterns. Then I let the second blow land. I told him I had closed our joint accounts, secured my portion of the savings, removed myself from liabilities, and protected my credit. The panic that surfaced in his eyes was instant and deep. He started sputtering questions. When had I done that? How? Why hadn't I talked to him first? He kept saying I was destroying our life together, as if he hadn't already set fire to it long before I stepped into that garage. I watched him unravel piece by piece, and for the first time since discovering the phone, I felt something close to relief. This wasn't revenge yet, but it was the beginning of it. He tried to recover, straightening his posture like he could still take control of the situation, but the cracks were showing everywhere, his voice trembling, his hands fidgeting, sweat forming along his hairline. He asked if there was anything he could do to fix this, but I could hear the real question beneath it. How much have you already taken from me? I didn't soften my tone when I answered. I told him plainly that actions have consequences, and he was finally meeting his. He didn't take that well. He slammed his hand on the counter, saying I was ruining his future. I looked him dead in the eyes and reminded him that he had destroyed our past. When his anger didn't sway me, he switched tactics, his favorite tactic. He began to cry. Big, dramatic sobs, the kind that might have knocked the wind out of me months ago. But now? It felt like watching bad theater. He said he'd been confused, that he never meant to hurt me, that those women meant nothing to him. I let him talk himself into a corner, and then I told him the part he never expected, that I had already contacted 3 of the women. Not all, just the ones whose messages were the most damning, the ones he'd made the biggest promises to. I explained how calmly they had responded, how quickly they shared even more screenshots, how fast the puzzle had come together once they realized they weren't the only ones. His face went white, truly white. He looked like he might faint or be sick. He kept whispering that I had ruined his reputation, that the women would never leave him alone now, that his life would be a disaster. And all I could think, quietly, steadily, was that he wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing control, losing the image he'd built, losing the comfort of juggling lies without consequences. And watching that realization settle into his expression felt strangely satisfying. He was shaking now, pacing the kitchen the same way he had paced the hallway hours earlier. But this time, there was no pretending, no mask, no bravado, just a cornered man grasping at the scraps of a life he thought he controlled. When he finally stopped moving long enough to look at me, he asked, almost in a whisper, how far I planned to go. I could tell he wasn't asking out of remorse. He wanted to know the limits of the damage, the border he could brace himself against. Unfortunately for him, he had never bothered to learn that I only set limits when trust exists. And he had burned that bridge down himself. So I told him the truth, that I had already informed his boss about the company-funded trips he'd used for personal rendezvous. I said it slowly, calmly, because I wanted him to hear every word. His jaw clenched, his shoulders stiffened, and for a moment, he looked at me like he finally understood who he had underestimated. He sputtered something about how I was trying to ruin his career, but the words sounded hollow even to him. It was almost poetic, how quickly a man who spent years lying without shame crumbled at the first taste of accountability. I didn't wait for him to regain his footing. I stood up, walked past him, and retrieved the suitcase I had packed days earlier. The zipper's sound echoed through the room, sharp and final. He followed me like a ghost, asking where I was going, begging me not to leave, insisting we could rebuild. But his words felt weightless. I carried my bags to the door, heart steady, breath even. When I stepped outside, he called after me, desperation cracking his voice open completely. I didn't turn back, not once, because the truth was simple. I had already left him the moment I opened that hidden phone in the garage. It took a few weeks for the dust to settle, emotionally, mentally, even physically. I moved into a small apartment across town, nothing extravagant. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet. Real quiet. Not the kind filled with suspicion or tension or waiting for footsteps at the door. Just silence. And you know what the strangest part was? My allergies vanished. Completely. No sneezing, no burning eyes, no waking up congested. It was like my body finally exhaled after holding its breath for far too long. My mornings changed too. Instead of rushing to make breakfast, plan his day, or anticipate whatever mood he might come home with, I started making coffee for myself. Slowly, deliberately. I'd stand by the window with the mug warming my hands, watching the sun creep over the rooftops. There was something healing about those small rituals, the ones that were never really mine before. I cooked when I felt like it. I left dishes in the sink without feeling guilty. I walked barefoot across the living room just because the floor felt cool and grounding beneath my feet. Little by little, pieces of me started returning, pieces I didn't even know I had lost. One evening, as I stood on my balcony listening to the distant hum of traffic, I realized I hadn't cried in days. Not because I was forcing myself to be strong, but because I no longer felt the weight of lies pressing against my ribs. He wasn't in my home. He wasn't in my air. He wasn't in my thoughts unless I let him in. And honestly, most days I didn't. I started noticing things I had overlooked for years, tiny joys that felt almost scandalous in their simplicity. The way the morning light pooled on my kitchen tiles like honey, the soft creak of my new apartment's wooden floorboards, the freedom of choosing what I wanted for dinner without hearing someone complain or make a face. I even bought flowers for myself, bright yellow ones that smelled fresh and real. Nothing like the artificial sweetness of the scents he used to say irritated him. Funny, isn't it? Turns out it wasn't the flowers causing the irritation. It was the life I was living. Some nights I'd sit on the couch with a blanket wrapped around my legs, scrolling through the evidence I'd collected. Not out of pain, but out of disbelief that I had lived with that level of betrayal without even realizing it. My therapist called it recontextualizing. I called it reclaiming my own damn narrative. Each screenshot, each timestamp, each lie no longer hurt me. They didn't define me. They became reminders of how far I'd come, how much stronger I'd grown, how much I'd survived. There were moments of loneliness, of course, quiet little aches that drifted in when the apartment got too silent. But even those moments felt cleaner than anything I'd felt in that house. They weren't coated in suspicion or self-doubt. They were just human, honest. And honesty, after so long without it, felt like fresh air filling my lungs. I could finally breathe without flinching. One morning, a few months after everything unraveled, I woke up before my alarm. No noise, no panic spike in my chest, no sense of bracing for something awful. Just calm. I made coffee, opened the window, and let the cool air roll over my skin. And in that quiet moment, I realized something that almost made me laugh. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for lies. I wasn't waiting for disappointment. My life, for once, belonged entirely to me. I don't pretend revenge fixed everything. It didn't erase the betrayal or magically patch the parts of me that cracked open in that garage. But it did something far more valuable. It gave me closure on my own terms. It stripped him of the power he'd held over my emotions, my peace, my future. And standing there in my small kitchen, sunlight warming my arms, I felt a quiet pride. Not for surviving him, no, for choosing myself in the aftermath. Sometimes people ask if I regret anything, and the truth? I don't. Not a single step. Finding that phone shattered me. Yes, but it also freed me. It pushed me out of a life built on lies and into one where I finally breathe clean air, both literally and metaphorically. And every day since, I've learned that healing isn't a dramatic moment. It's a collection of tiny choices, tiny victories, tiny breaths, and I'm finally breathing again.